Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Avatar: The Way of Water. So, this movie is to full on be Free Willy. This movie is to also want to make me quote the Star Trek movie, Admiral, there be whales here, because that's what I kind of feel about this film. So, this movie is to go on and do a lot of recycling story wise from the first movie and make it seem like it's new when it's not. We also have the sequel even be more so like screensaver the film, because if there was so many visuals in the first film, they want to even do that more so in this movie to just kind of eat up more time because they realize they have no story to tell in the sequel film. We also, for a sequel movie, go on and do the most cliche-ish thing, which is to take our certain number of characters and put them in a brand new environment and have there be problems with them being in this new environment, but eventually they realize that they have to kind of come together against this new threat, which really isn't all that new. It's the same threat, but it's a little bit different. So, with that said, we have me just want to go on and state that this movie is bad. Uh, but I think a lot of people might be on the fence with this movie. A lot of people probably go on and state that it's like, well, obviously this movie was bound to suck. But there might also be some people that are just like, no, I liked this movie regardless of it just feeling like an underwater themed movie. And we also have so much recycling going on that the cast list looks really similar also. So of course it does. Um, but yeah, so when Jake's family goes into this new environment, they go on and hate and fear them because they're slightly tweakingly different with one extra finger. And so, if I wasn't to go on and state the words hate and fear like X-Men, we also have like a Days of Future Past scene in this movie also, where uh, we have one character who is talking to basically herself because one actress is to play two different roles in this film. So yeah. Uh, but anyways, yeah, I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers. Because yeah, like that is a very quick way to go on and explain this movie, which I really didn't do enough of. Um, if anything, for when Jake was to come in and become this avatar to try to make his way into learning all about the Na'vi, it seems that they're going that same exact route with the villain of this story. So yeah, so not a lot of new things. But anyways, so this movie was bad. I was to go on and watch it through a bootleg way through an app called Yes Movies. So if you can go on and find Yes Movies, you should be able to find and see Avatar: The Way of Water for absolutely free. Especially if you want to just get a clear consensus or not get spoiled by this film, then that is a means to be able to see this film. Or you can just go on and see it into a theater, or wait till it just comes on Disney Plus. Because I'm sure, considering Avatar is now be in Disney Plus, then that's where, of course, the sequel is going to eventually be. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to just double fire this bad boy up. I know I really didn't say much about this movie, but I kind of tiptoed my way in to try to like give away some things, but because it's not a good movie anyways. So with that said, let's just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time we get to spoil this movie. So in the very beginning of this film, we have Jake kind of narrating that Neytiri is to have a number of these beads for every big event that has ever happened in their life. So we had Jake and Neytiri, who is to have a son. It's one bead. We find out that Grace's avatar was to somehow be pregnant with a child, even though she's a corpse now. I guess avatars can still have children. So Jake and Neytiri were to take in this kid as their own and have that kid be called Kiri. And so not only that, it seems that since they've already had enough kids, like 3 or 4 of them, we also have this kid named Spider, who actually could not have gone on and been gone to go to Earth because he was too young and he couldn't be put into a cryo bed. So this kid just grew up on Pandora, and this kid, of course, is Spider. And I'm assuming that really we just had Jake and Neytiri who adopted this kid also. Spider ends up actually being Miles's son. And so there ends up being a whole story about that. So Jake and Neytiri, after they've gone on and kind of like done everything they could with all of these kids, they go on and have this whole date night where they're just kind of flying around on these mountain banshees. And we have them, of course, like Kiri is to go on and watch old videos of Grace like talking about like past events and stuff like that from the other film. We have Jake and Neytiri just kind of sitting down and looking up at the stars and realizing that they're seeing a brand new star. And whenever they are to see that, they worry because they're like, oh my god, like, are the humans coming back to try to take over Pandora? Come to find out they are. We have this huge, massive transporting ship that crashes its way onto Pandora and is to start to like put flames upon the way of destroying all these like hammerhead animals and all these kind of random avatar things, and trying to have like RDA bulldozers come crashing through, and military guys who are all in these amplified mobility platforms that are kind of just checking things out to just kind of make sure that they landed in a safe space. So we go on to have an avatar that is being woken up in this medical bed, and he wakes up to start attacking people as he is seeing avatars all around him. So we come to find out that that avatar is none other than Miles himself, who has been revived in this way. So Miles is to be attacking these other avatars that just so happen to be military guys that had died from the first movie that are coming back for the sequel. And so we have Wayne Fleet and a number of other military people like Recom Z-Dog or Recom Fike that, of course, are coming back into this movie to be Miles's kind of group here. So Miles is like, oh, okay, all right, like, so I'm an avatar now, like, but like that doesn't really explain much. So Miles is to watch a video with Miles explaining what had all happened here, where Miles had given Selfridge's or Miles had given Selfridge his DNA for them to go on and kind of clone him as a avatar, and so they were able to accomplish that. Selfridge even goes on to explain the whole process and everything like that, because they kind of have him just briefly in this film. So Miles is like, okay, all right, so like I'm gonna be me, but I'm just a little bit younger, but I have quite a bit of knowledge. But not knowledge of the final fight and how that went down. So we then go on to have the Na'vi find out that the humans are trying to get certain resources with these gunships that are to be the Aero plate SA2 Samson, whatever, the gunships that I'll probably just call the SA2s. So we have these ships go along with this train, and so we have the Navis with kind of Jake leading the charge, trying to derail this train. And once they go on to derail this train, we have like Jake and Norm that are trying to get all these guns. We all of a sudden have certain young spotters that are just kind of like, well, hey man, like, let's look at these guns. Like, isn't that cool? And we of course have like Jake and kind of disciplining these kids because it's like, well, hey, like, don't go on to do that. Like, you could have killed somebody by accident. So, like, you're grounded for a month, yada, yada, yada. So, we have the kids want to go out and do some exploring, anyways. And so, we'll realize that that's, of course, going to be a mistake. So, we have Kiri that is talking to Moat, and that, of course, is Neytiri's mother. So we have Kiri, who's to kind of be this kind of unusual avatar. She seems to be kind of different than all the other ones. So we also have a moment with Spider where he's going on and talking to Norm, kind of like both of them are kind of giving one another crap. So I think this is where Spider ends up talking to Kiri, and it's a state like how like Kiri can breathe like earth air for like an hour, but Spider can only breathe like Pandora air for like 10 minutes. So we go on to have the Valkyrie shuttle that transports Miles and his men to meet up with General Ardmore. So General Ardmore is in her own amplifier suit of sort, and she's kind of doing some drills and stuff like that, and it's like, oh hey, yeah, like, oh it's nice to see you here. So we have General Ardmore, who is talking about like the new latest equipment that they have, these swarm assemblers that are putting a bunch of equipment together. And so the general is also talking about the resources that they had lost because the Na'vi had attacked this train. So we have Miles that goes on and asks the general, it's like, well, hey, where is Jake and these Na'vis now? And so, like, well, they're in the Hallelujah Mountains, and every time we go on and send like a gunship or something out there, like, they end up getting destroyed. So Miles is like, oh, okay, all right, well, so we then go to have Miles who's like, well, okay, like, well, we're gonna go there with a gunship and we're gonna try to do some like reconnaissance, and so like that's their next plan. So while that's going on, we have Jake's kids. They're going on and doing some exploring. They were to go on and find this kind of gunship, and so they like start to thumb through it while Curie is kind of playing around with uh, some of these animals like fan lizards or wood spires, and she's just kind of like very much she is to be kind of like how like Sigourney Weaver was in like Alien Resurrection, where like she would go on and just be touching the aliens and just be like, oh yeah, like all right. She'd be like one with the Earth. That's kind of how like she is in this film. So we have Miles and the rest of the kind of military Na'vi that go on here, and they're kind of exploring around. They end up seeing some viper wolves, and so the viper wolves leave them alone, so they kind of keep going on. So we come to find both Miles and his men, as well as also Jake's kids going on to find this old Link shack from the first movie, where, of course, Jake had gone on to kill the original Miles. So, Miles is to try and go on and like find a record within this amplified mobility platform to see how he can like see his own death. So Miles then is to kind of see his own death and get audio from that, while his men are going on and finding Spider and Curie, as well as as well as Jake's kids, and they're kind of grabbing them and like, well, hey, look what we found. So Miles is going on to kind of question these kids. Is like, oh, like you're Jake's kids, aren't you? Like I can tell. So we have Jake's son that is telling Jake, it's like, well, hey, like we're here and there's these guys here, so Jake knows about it. So we go on to have Miles, who takes, who of course just takes Spider, and is to bring him with him as he kind of leaves all the other avatars, or all the other Na'vi, and is to go to this Dragon Assault ship and have General Ardmore go on and torture Spider for information. So we have, of course, let me pause here for 1 second. Okay, so now that Jake realizes that Miles is after him, we have Jake and Neytiri that are like, okay, well, let's jump ship, like, let's get out of here, because we know that they're going to try and hunt us down, so we don't want to bring the fight to these people. So Jake gives up his leadership position and is to hand it over to someone else, and so he walks away, and they end up going to as far as the reef, with the reef people, that of course to be led by Tonowari. So they go to this place and they come to find out that they of course will have to go on and learn how to like swim and how to breathe underwater to kind of to to make their keep. And so the first thing that they end up needing to learn is how to ride like their water version of the mountain banshee, which of course is the Lu, the LLU, Lu. So and so we have Jake that needs to go on and learn how to do this thing, and it's kind of very unusual how they have to kind of go on and kind of set this up. So, but not only that, there's so many things kind of going on with the kids also during the early parts of this, and we also have things going on with Miles. But anyways, we have some of the kids that are just having problems with meeting people and them not just saying that they're freaks. So we have Loke, who is one of Jake's sons, kind of the younger one, and or the middle one. Anyways, so Loke ends up going off to a hunt with some of the other Na'vi, and their plan is to go outside the reef where sometimes the humans hunt also. So Loke is just like, okay, like that seems fine. So they go out there, and what ends up happening is that the other Na'vi end up leaving Loke out there for him to get swallowed by this nut or Latulsa, and this thing is massive. It just kind of comes in, is like coming out of the water, and like and it's to almost kill off Loke here, as he has his own Lu, and like he was kind of going with these guys. So Loke ends up going on and trying to go in underwater and have the Nalutsa try and go on and keep trying to like grab at him consistently. It's kind of like a whole like alligator movie. So we all of a sudden have Loke, who is to desperately need air, and so when Loke desperately tries to swim up to get air, we have the Nalutsa go on like, okay, I'm going to get to you, and we have the Tolkien, the whale thing just kind of go on and smash into this other monster and kill it and protect this Loke. So we have Loke, who is trying to get up so that way he can breathe, but it seems that Loke is to almost starting to drown, but he surprisingly ends up on the surface because we have uh, Tolkien that is to kind of push him to the surface. So when Loke awakes, he is now realizing that he can talk to Tolkien, and like, well, hey, like you're kind of like one of us. Like I can go on and kind of just talk to you, and so it seems that this whale had been deemed an outsider. It's like, well, why? And it seems that the whale couldn't really give him that answer. So come to find out, the whale, the Tolkien, was to have this kind of thing jabbed into one of its fins, and so like Loke is like, well, hey, you just saved my life. I'm going to go on and do you a favor and kind of pull this thing out. So, come to find out, all of these Tolkiens are to have these kind of poacher ships, and they're trying to kill these Tolkiens off because, of course, they have this certain resource that is to kind of be like the fountain of youth, which we'll find out has to be a whole story later on in the film. And this whole thing is to be called the Emerita. And so that thing is worth a lot of money, and then the rest of the whale avatar, or the whale Navi thing, the Tolkien is just left for scraps. Like, I guess it's not to be sold as like meat or anything like that. They just need that one thing from it. And it's like, yeah, that just seems like a waste, but okay, like, it is what it is. So yeah, so we had all that breakdown. So we have when Loke is to finally come back, and he comes back to Onung, who of course is to be like the chief's daughter. It seems like them two are going to get together at some point. Both Loke and Onung. We have her, as well as the rest of Jake's kids, go off to this sacred place, because we have Loke, who goes on and takes the blame for what had happened, even though it was obviously Onung's brother's like decision to try to kill this kid off, because it's like, well, hey, this kid knew better. But Loke is like, no, I pushed him, I made him go, I made him do this, so that way maybe at some point they can go on to be friends. So, but Onung takes all of the Jake kids to go off to this sacred place that is to really just be the Eywa. So we have Kiri that ends up connecting to Eywa, and she ends up having a seizure because of it. So we have the kids that are trying to take care of Kiri. They're trying to rush her back, and come to find out, when Norm comes there and goes on to explain, it's like, well, yeah, she just had like a seizure, and so Kiri should never go on and connect with Eywa again, or she might die because of it. And Jake is like, really? It's like, yeah, like, she's gonna die. So when Kiri was to go on and be connected with Eywa, she was to talk to Grace in her avatar form. And when Kiri was to ask about her father, that's when Grace kind of lost connection with her. And so that, of course, is to be kind of like the Days of Future Past thing, because we also have Kiri that is also to be Sigourney Weaver in this film. I was to get a little confused, because, of course, when I would see that, I'm like, okay, like, Sigourney Weaver's on the credits, so she's, like, credits as Grace, but then I'm like, no, wait, like, we have them, like, two different people here, so I got a little confused. So we go on to now have this poacher boat, and so Miles is going to attach himself to this poacher boat, and so they, of course, are to go on and try and attack these Tolkiens, so that way they can go on and get these the things that they need from them. So what they end up doing is we have this kind of like harpoon deal that kind of attaches itself to one of these tokens, and then we have these small subs that come in and are to shoot off to the sides underneath this whale where it's more like sensitive, and they have the token kind of flip over on its side, and they go on and have it die that way, and they end up going through its mouth to obtain the Emerita, because of course it's a fountain of youth like thing. So, and we end up finding out when Loke is to go inside this whale and kind of attach itself to this Tolkien's brain, it kind of gives him this whole story, and he's like, oh, like, okay, so, like, really you were just, like, misjudged as some outsider, but they just claimed you as that anyways. Like, oh, that's too bad. So, we... we go on to have also the moment that I forgot about, where we had Miles, who was to need to learn how to be Na'vi, because Miles is going on and talking to all the avatars and stating like, well, hey man, like, we should go on and learn how to, like, speak Na'vi. We should learn how to go on and be, like, using all the things that they use, and so that way we can start to really get familiar with all this. So we have Spider that is going on and teaching Miles all of this stuff, and so it's like, oh man, like, this is like is all of a sudden just Miles gonna just turn around and realize, like, you know what, this is all a mistake. Like, I fell in love with this stuff, like Jake did in the first movie, and so we're just gonna have Miles who just kind of turns around and realizes, like, well, yeah, like, maybe I was wrong about all this, but no, it seems that Miles is still going to be the villain in this movie. So we have, at one point, all the Tolkiens are to start to surface, and we have the Na'vi that are looking at all these whales, like, well, hey, why are all these whales here? And Loke is telling him, it's like, well, hey, like the one whale that I talked to, like, hey, is not like the outsider that you thought it was. It's like, well, hey, it's still gonna get treated like that way anyways. It's like, well, but, like, this whale can really go on and help us. It's like, well, that doesn't matter because it's still an outsider. So Loke is trying to convince Tanawari that he's wrong, and Jake is telling him, like, hey man, like, don't make waves here, like, don't make waves, because, like, we have a good thing going here, don't mess this up. So we have Loke and we have Onung that are just like yeah, like my, like, our dads don't know what they're talking about. So we get to a certain part where Miles ends up obtaining a bunch of the Na'vi and is to use it as a bargaining chip to get Jake. And so we have Miles that takes his son's communicator and is to kind of like, hey man, like, come and get me. So we have Jake who has to go on and tell all the Na'vi. It's like, well, hey, like, here's what's going on, and like now you guys are gonna have to all come with me, and we're gonna have to just try to fight this all out over by this poacher ship. So we have the Na'vi with their Lus or their Banshee, their mountain Banshees or whichever. They're all like they've all made their way here. So what happens is we're thinking that Jake is just going to turn himself in so that way he can trade his kids. And come to find out instead, we just have this Tolkien that comes flying in and starts flopping onto this ship and just starts wrecking house. And everybody's like, oh my god! So we all of a sudden have all these ships that are just kind of crazily, wildly just like starting to like depart from this from this poacher ship, and they're starting to all separate because he realizes like, oh my god, like we're gonna have to go on and kind of just fight this out, fight this this Tolkien. And we also had moments when the Navi kids were trying to get away when Jake was to go on and just kind of cut their ties. And so we had the little submarines that were trying to go on and try to capture the Navi to get them on the ship. And so there's a whole lot of crap going on here. There's a whole lot of confusion that can easily happen. So we even have a one point where Scoresby, who is to kind of be the Ahab to the Moby Dick kind of character, we go on to have Tolkien, who ends up kind of getting like kind of harpooned, and then the whale kind of takes this rope and kind of uses it against Scoresby's ship as Dr. Garvin is to just kind of laugh at Scoresby. It's like, well, hey, like he's gonna come back and get you now. Like he's gonna come after you because we have Doctor Garvin, who I guess is trying to be the good guy here. Maybe we'll go on and see him as a sequel, be the good guy at some point, and just kind of have him consistently keep getting used here. Because he was just this like marine biologist who was just sent to help them try to figure out these Tolkiens. And so we have Miles who had Jake's kids, and then he loses them, and then he somehow like regains them, and so like he's trying to use them consistently as this bargaining chip. So when he loses the kids, he regains the kids. So it's just a whole thing. We have certain kids who decided like, hey, let's go back for like all of their family and let's try to rescue them. And they end up having at some points needing to get into gunfights, and so a whole lot of things are going on here. So there's so much going on. So we again have two, and one of them is Tuck or Tolk. One of them is Tuck, and the other is another Na'vi that ends up getting like tied again onto the side of this boat. So, and Tulk is just like, I can't believe that I've gotten not only once but twice like kind of cuffed to something. So what happens is when the oldest son, Nitayam, is to try and rescue bits of his family, he ends up getting shot. So they try to grab Nitayam and kind of bring him back to the surface, And come to find out, by the time that he gets to the surface and they're trying to like figure out a way to kind of keep his wound from bleeding out, Jake and Neytiri are to realize that their oldest son is going to die. And so we have Nitiyam that just states that it's like, well, I just want to go home. And so all of a sudden he just fades, and we see Jake and Neytiri's oldest son just die here. And we again have Miles is like, well, hey, like, are you gonna come back for the rest of your kids? Like I got some people here for you. Like, come on, like come and get them. So we have Neytiri that is in mourning for her son, and Jake is like, hey Neytiri, like you have to get your game face on, and we have to come back for the rest of our kids that are still alive. So like your heart like needs to be strong here. So like let's go for the rest of our kids. So we have Loke who's like, well, hey, I'll go, like let me help, and Jake's like, no, you stay here. And they of course go anyways. So we go on to, I think it's Kiri and Tuck who ends up getting taken, because that makes story wise the most sense here. So we have Miles that is to be like having a knife to Kiri, and so when Jake finally arrives, we have Neytiri that is to grab Spider and is to put a knife to his neck and be like, well, hey, like a son for a son. You killed my son, I'm gonna kill yours. And when Neytiri is to almost kill Spider, Miles is like, no, don't do it. And so Miles is to kind of put it down. It's like, oh my god, so Miles actually does have a heart. So he's not that bad of a villain. So when Jake is to have Neytiri kind of like, okay, like take the rest of the kids, Jake then turns to Miles and is like, okay, let's have this out. And so they fight, they scramble, they get into a bunch of like submissions. There's like some arm bars, there's certain times where there might be some like head scissor things going on, certain kind of submissions going on underwater. And we, of course, have to assume that Jake is going to win out here because he has more water holding breath skill than Miles is to, of course, have, uh, simply because of like Jake just being a little bit more trained with the Navi that can seemingly almost breathe underwater or just hold their breath for a very long time. We consistently have Jake's sons who consistently have to bob up and down when they're with the other Na'vi, who can kind of just easily just almost breathe underwater, like hold their breath for a very long time. So we go on to have Jake, who is to kind of put Miles into this kind of rear naked choke kind of maneuver. And so Jake lets go and lets Miles just fall. So we have Loke and we have Spider who comes back, and Loke is to find Jake, and is to try to give him like breathing exercises so they can get out of this ship. And Spider ends up going on to find Miles and is to just grab his body and kind of get him out of there because it's his dad. Like he has to go in and just kind of save this guy because it's the right thing to do. So Kiri all of a sudden is just connecting with all of the amphibian animal whatever things, and is kind of using all these connections to be able to find Neytiri and Tuck. And because they're just kind of stuck somewhere. They don't know where to go. So curious to give Neytiri uh, this kind of this fish to kind of latch onto, and for them to just kind of easily swim out of here. And so everybody kind of makes it out, and so everybody makes their way back to shore. So Miles does get revived here, and so Miles ends up jumping on this mountain banshee and is telling Spider, like, well, hey, come with me, like, you're my son, and like just come on. And Spider's like, no, like, I'm not leaving with you. So Spider goes back with the Sully family, and Miles just takes the mountain banshee and just goes off. So we have all of Jake's family, all left of him, just kind of uh, reconnecting when Jake and Loke are on this whale, or on the Tolkien, and they're being kind of dragged by the whale. And so we have Jake that is talking to Tonawari, and like there might be this whole thing of like Jake thinking like, well, like, I'm sorry that I brought all this on you guys. Like, I think maybe it'd probably be best if I left. And Tonawari's like, no, like, you're one of us. Like, you're staying. And Jake's like, okay, great, because like, until another sequel happens, when I'm probably gonna leave you people and go on to somewhere else. Like, so everything, it seems, is to work out. And so they go on and they bury, they go on and put Nitiyam, and they put him in the water, and they have him be brought to Awa. And so Awa just kind of consumes their oldest son, because it states, it's like, well, yeah, like, for when we are to go on and get something, we're also to kind of give something back. So we have both Jake and Neytiri who connect with Awa, and they're giving, or Awa is giving them some flashback of their oldest son when, like, they were fishing together, and Neytiri was watching in the background and just kind of giving them this nice moment. And so really just kind of leaving off with the fact of like, well, like we're not going to run anymore, like this is our home and we're going to defend it, so if anybody's going to come at us, then like we'll be ready for them. So that kind of seems to be like the setup for the sequel. I know I went on and kind of rushed through a lot of the 3-hour part of this movie, but I really just wanted to get this review done. Plus there was just a lot of like Kiri, Spider, Loke, and I'm probably not even pronouncing that right, because like, and because pronunciation of certain names, or there's stuff that I didn't really cover of Nitiyam, where he goes on and he's like asking Jake, it's like, well, hey, like, should I go with you? And Jake's like, no, like, you stay here. And Nitiyama just kind of goes on anyways, and is to try and help out his mother by kind of having this bow and arrow. We also, speaking of the bow and arrow, we had Neytiri that is talking to Jake and is to show him the bow and arrow from her father that he had given to her, and say like, well, hey, like, my dad like gave this to me to defend my people, and like like what is this if I'm not going to go on and like I'm going to defend them, if I'm just going to run away? And so yeah, so there's just a lot of interesting scenes, but not good enough for me to go on and state that it's a positive review. So with that said, I'm just kind of cleaning up anything that I probably forgot about. There's probably a ton of stuff in this movie that I could not bear to take too much time to talk about. There's a whole like big chunk of like Loke going on and with Tolkien and just kind of on the wing and just kind of doing all this stuff where like Tolkien is to kind of go into the water and uh, we have Loke who goes and does this flip and he splashes in the water too. There's a whole bit of that all going on in this movie where they have to like show all of Jake's kids seeing a bunch of like avatar versions of certain sea creatures like avatar devil rays and all these kinds of stuff or stingrays and that are just slightly tweakingly different and all it's a lot of that going on in this film. So a lot of that stuff I just chose to kind of cut out of this review because it's just a lot of visual stuff. It's a lot of just like that's the reason why I try to cut a lot of parts or bits and pieces about this movie. A lot of it wasn't also perfectly reviewed, but either way, I'm just going to say that I'm going to try and just get out of here so I can just get this out. So, without a doubt, let me know in the comments below how you felt about this movie. But yeah, you can go on and correct me about whatever I was to technically ill pronounce in this movie. But hey, when really looking at it, I was to probably go on and research and figure out a lot more stuff than anyone else would have gone to do. Because I know a lot of them would have probably just been like, oh yeah, like this is a brand new movie, so like nobody knows anything about this stuff, so blah 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 blah. And so yeah, so with that said, goodbye everybody. Bye everybody.